And Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is on a two-day state visit to India, thanked Prime Minister Narendra Modi for the invitation and praised Moscow and New Delhi ties. Now, during the bilateral talk with PM Modi at Hyderabad House, Putin described Moscow-New Delhi ties as deeply rooted in history and added that the two sides have opened multiple areas of cooperation in aircraft, space exploration, military and technology. The two leaders also touched upon the Ukraine war. Now, on the Ukraine war, Putin said talks are ongoing with partners, including the U.S., on a possible peaceful statement. PM Modi, on the other hand, said that India is not neutral, but on the side of peace, and added that both the countries stand shoulder to shoulder with peaceful resolutions.
से यूक्रेन के संकट के बाद हमारी लगातार चर्चा होती रही है। आपने भी समय समय पर एक सच्चे मित्र के रूप में हमें सभी चीजों से अवगत कराया है। मैं समझता हूं कि ये विश्वास बहुत बड़ी ताकत है और आपको मैंने अनेक बार इस विषय की चर्चा भी की है और विश्व समक्ष भी मैंने रखा है। विश्व का कल्याण शांति के मार्ग पर ही है। हम सबको मिलकर के शांति के रास्ते तलाशने चाहिए और पिछले दिनों जो प्रयास चल रहे हैं, मुझे पूरा विश्वास है कि विश्व फिर से एक बार शांति की दिशा में लौटेगा।
Now, earlier in the day, the Russian president received a ceremonial welcome at the Droupadi Bhavan, where he was greeted by President Droupadi Murmu and PM Modi. Other senior Indian officials like External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar, Delhi LG Vinay Kumar Saxena, and CDS General Anil Chauhan were also present to welcome him. Along with the ceremonial welcome, Putin also received a Guard of Honor from Indian Tri-Services. The Russian president later paid a visit to Rajghat, where he laid a wreath to pay homage to Mahatma Gandhi and signed the visitor's book. In the evening, Indian President Droupadi Murmu will be hosting a state banquet in the Russian president's honor, post which he will be departing from India. And to discuss more, we're now being joined by Dr. Glenn Dyson from Oslo. He is a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway and an editor at the Russia in Global Affairs Journal. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Now, you're also a defense expert, and when it comes to defense, India-Russia ties have been existing since the Soviet era. How would you assess Russia-India defense ties, and how do you look at it going forward after this bilateral?
Well, I think the ties between India and Russia, they've always been exceptionally good, but a common view is that they've been underutilized, given that the two countries have such good relations and a lot of common interests that it should have been developed further. Now, I think given that the world is now undergoing massive change, that is this transition from this hegemonic order to a multipolar order, that the relationship between Russia and India becomes even more important because, as we know, when a hegemon is in decline, it's more likely to act more aggressively, that is, to use its power over the economic system to prevent the rise of rivals and coerce even allies to be more loyal as opposed to cooperating with the rivals. Meanwhile, there's a lot of concern that the world might simply drift towards two poles, that it will be US and China. So in a multipolar world, it's very important to make it multipolar, that countries diversify their economic ties. So for countries like India and Russia to work closer together, it means that the world is not going to be too America or China centric. So I think that it was always made common sense for India and Russia to deepen their economic ties and take advantage of the good relations. But in this critical point in human history, I think it's even more important that these two countries come together and deepen their economic ties. And it makes sense that, given the history of trade, that military, industrial production, as well as energy would spearhead this. But overall, there's a desire, of course, to diversify into other regions as well.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that, defense ties. We're also looking at how the West is looking at this. We know that when it comes to sanctions, Western nations have been talking about sanctions on Russia, although some nations have been holding back and almost gone against it. How are they looking at these bilateral taking place?
Well, in the West, there's been an obsession with the strategic defeat of Russia. So anyone cooperating with Russia is seen as negative. Also, keep in mind that since 2014, when the Western countries toppled the government in Ukraine, this is when the Russians considered their goal for Greater Europe to be dead. And now they're pursuing what's referred to as Greater Eurasia. That means for the first time in now 300 years, the Russians are looking not towards the West anymore for economic development. They're looking east. So none of this looks good for the Europeans. So there will be a lot of pressure for India to essentially do what Europe is doing, that is to cut itself off from other centers of power, and then only trade with the US and Europe. Again, this is kind of the trap the Europeans went into as well. They cut themselves off from Russia to cut themselves off from China. The Americans also pressuring the Europeans to put sanctions and pressuring India. And at the end of the day, they're stuck in a relationship only with the United States, which means that there's less prosperity and also they become political vassals. So I think India so far stayed out of this trap. But in the short to medium term focus, it's simply to make sure that trying to make India cut itself off from Russia, also because they want to weaken Russia. So they will have a greater benefit against Russia in this proxy war we're fighting in Ukraine.